Today we're looking far beyond Earth. We are charting the resurgence of this great power rivalry in a brand new theater space.
And this isn't just a race for, symbolic prestige.
Not at all. It's a high-stakes struggle for future economic control, for military advantage, and really for global governance. It extends from Earth orbit all the way to what the sources are calling the ultimate high ground, the moon.
So our mission today is to dive deep into these sources, the detail, the strategic, the commercial, and the ideological competition between the U.S. and China in space.
Yeah, we're examining how this rivalry is fundamentally reshaping everything. I mean, everything from the development of reusable rockets to the very foundation of international space law.
The stakes here involve who will define the rules, who builds the infrastructure.
And who establishes the norms that are going to govern humanity's expansion out into the cosmos. And, well, losing this advantage could mean relinquishing the technological and legal primacy the U.S. secured during the original Cold War space race.
And to really set the stage for this urgency, we had to start with a really serious alarm bell, sounded by a key figure. Former NASA chief Michael Griffin. He was extremely blunt about the U.S. position.
Incredibly blunt. He warned that the U.S. needs to, and I'm quoting here, start over with its moon landing plan.
Start over? Why?
Because, in his words, they have lost a lot of time. His quote is just terrifyingly direct. He says, "We have lost a lot of time, and we may not be able to return to the moon before the Chinese execute their own first landing."
Wow. So he's saying China might actually get there first.
He is. He acknowledges that space exploration is inherently difficult. Success is guaranteed to no one, but the implication is crystal clear. The U.S. has been moving too slowly, and that's created a window for China to seize the lead.
So this current competition, what does it ultimately boil down to?
It means we've moved so far past just planting a flag or collecting a few kilograms of rock. This is a foundational contest over who establishes the critical infrastructure and sets the norms for the next century of space activity.
And if the U.S. doesn't maintain its leadership, what happens?
We risk giving up that geopolitical advantage that comes from defining the rules of the road, and that, well, it threatens national security, it fundamentally compromises our economic competitiveness in these huge emerging sectors, and it just reduces our global influence when it comes to free access and transparency in space.
Okay, so let's get into the specifics of this scramble, the immediate timeline for the moon. It seems like the rivalry is just crystal clear there.
It is. You have two dramatically different and competing approaches. On the U.S. side, you have the Artemis program.
Right, which is designed to return humans to the moon for, sustained exploration.
That's the plan. But Artemis has faced persistent delays. The initial target date for that crewed landing was, 2024?
2024, yeah. And that's slipped multiple times.
Multiple times, mostly due to technical challenges, funding volatility, and these delays, they create a serious vulnerability in the U.S. strategic timeline.
Meanwhile, China is accelerating. And accelerating quickly.
Very quickly. Their state-backed effort has this explicit goal to place a crew on the moon by 2030. And they're already achieving these huge milestones that the sources are calling global firsts.
Like the Chang'e 6 mission.
Exactly. That mission in June 2024 was truly groundbreaking. It successfully returned the first ever samples from the moon's far side.
And that's not just a scientific achievement, right? It's a bigger statement.
It's a massive technological statement. I mean, think about it. Landing and operating on the far side is inherently more difficult.
Ugh.
You need a dedicated relay satellite just to talk to Earth because the moon itself is blocking your signal.
So it shows incredible systems maturity.
It really does. Now, compare that to the U.S. approach for Artemis. It relies on this incredibly complex and, frankly, unproven launch architecture with SpaceX's Starship.
The plan for Artemis 3, it's all about the Starship lander and this complicated in-orbit refueling system.
And that's where the risk really gets exposed. This isn't just, putting a ship into orbit. It's conducting a massive, multi-stage logistics operation in space before you can even start your journey to the moon.
How complex are we talking? I mean, what are the failure points here?
The sources paint a picture of just immense logistical hurdles. To fully load that Starship lander with all the propellant it needs, we're talking about up to 1,000 tons of propellant.
1,000 tons.
Yep. And to do that, the estimates suggest NASA and SpaceX might need as many as 12 separate Starship launches.
12 launches just to fuel one lander.
12 launches, just for the fuel.
Okay.
Each one of those involves a highly precise rendezvous and docking maneuver, and they're dealing with cryogenic propellants, like liquid oxygen, which are prone to boil off.
And just evaporate in space.
Basically, yeah. So you need complex cooling systems, you have to do it fast. It's a concept SpaceX is testing for sure, but it is not yet proven operational. And that complexity, it just creates huge vulnerabilities and, of course, delays.
And China's approach is different.
It seems to be, for now. For their initial effort, they're relying on a more traditional, state-controlled, vertically integrated approach.
Meaning they're building their own dedicated hardware.
Exactly. They're developing the Long March 10 carrier rocket, which is specifically for that initial crewed lunar landing, and they expect it to be ready by their 2030 deadline. It's a more direct, government-controlled path with potentially fewer variables.
And this isn't just about the moon for them.
Right.
The sources say their ambitions go much deeper.
That's the broader strategic picture, absolutely. You see it in their long-term plans, like the Tianwen-4 mission, which is scheduled for 2029.
What's that one targeting?
It's highly ambitious. It's designed to explore Jupiter's moon Callisto and then do a flyby of Uranus. These are deep solar system objectives. It positions China not just as a lunar competitor, but as a long-haul scientific power aiming for leadership across the whole solar system.
So if the moon landing is the symbolic prize, the area around it, Cislunar Space, is the strategic one.
That's the infrastructural prize, yes. Cislunar Space is that region affected by the gravity of both the Earth and the Moon. The sources call it the ultimate high ground, and for good reason.
Why is it so critical?
It's the ultimate high ground because it controls the flow of resources and information for the future. It's vital for any future economic ecosystem. Think of it like the strategic choke point between Earth and everywhere else.
The sources mention some really interesting commercial uses, like secure data storage and edge processing sites. A data center near the moon. Why?
There are two really compelling factors. The first is uninterrupted solar power. In certain orbits, your hardware can get solar energy constantly without the Earth's day-night cycle getting in the way.
Which means more efficiency. And the second reason is cooling.
Exactly. The near vacuum of space has much lower cooling needs compared to these massive energy-hungry data centers we have on Earth. Now, the hardware has to be radiation-hardened, which is a big challenge.
And expensive.
And very expensive. But the long-term potential is enormous. China, for instance, has planned for a space-based supercomputer they think could reach a 1,000 peta operations per second by 2030.
1,000 PETA operations. For our listeners, how do we contextualize that? What kind of power is that?
To put that in perspective, the most powerful supercomputers on Earth today operate in that range. And they're used for things like climate modeling, nuclear simulations, cutting-edge AI.
So putting that power in space is a monumental advantage.
It is for future space logistics, for military intelligence processing, for commanding autonomous systems. It gives you a high-speed, secure digital advantage away from any terrestrial attack.
Then you have the moon itself, with its tangible resources driving this race.
Right, the scientific opportunities and the explicit economic drivers. Scientifically, the moon is indispensable. We're really focused on those South Pole craters.
Because they're permanently shadowed.
They are, and they could hold 1 billion years of history trapped in rock and ice. They're time capsules, basically. And the far side, the shielded zone, is perfect for radio astronomy because it's completely blocked from all the radio noise we generate on Earth.
So maintaining access to those sites is a huge national objective.
Absolutely. But the immediate economic drivers are probably the biggest reason for the speed of this race, specifically water ice and rare earth minerals.
The lunar ice could be turned into rocket fuel.
Right. Precisely. If you can process that ice into hydrogen and oxygen, the moon effectively becomes the gas station of the solar system.
Which is a complete game changer.
It is. Lifting off from the moon takes way less energy than lifting off from Earth. So if you don't have to haul your fuel from here, deep space missions become vastly cheaper and more feasible. That ice is the key that unlocks the rest of the solar system.
And then there are the rare earth minerals. I know China already dominates the terrestrial market for these.
They do, and extending that dominance to the moon sounds like an economic nightmare for the West.
What are these minerals used for?
They're essential for over 200 high-tech products. Everything from your smartphone to advanced military hardware like the F-35 fighter jet. In 2022, China accounted for something like 63% of the world's rare earth mining and a staggering 85% of the processing.
So if these minerals are more accessible on the moon, whoever gets there first and establishes the rules for using them
Gains a profound long-term economic and military advantage. Controlling access to those resources becomes a global economic imperative. It could create a single-source dependency that makes our current situation look trivial.
Okay, so let's shift from the physical frontier of the moon to the digital infrastructure that underpins life on Earth. I don't think most people realize just how dependent we are on space assets every single day.
It's easy to take for granted, but the reliance is truly extensive. Most Americans depend on space far more than they realize. I mean, beyond the obvious things like GPS and weather forecasts.
Give us some specifics. What are some systems that run on space data that we just don't think about?
Well, everything from utility companies, which use satellites to monitor energy flow across power grids, to precision farming, which uses satellite imagery to optimize crop health. Then there's the entire financial sector.
Banking, stock markets.
All of it. They all rely on satellites for secure, globally synchronized transactions, often timed down to the nanosecond.
And of course, the U.S. military's reliance is total. Communications, intelligence, navigation, targeting. If you disrupt those assets, the military's ability to project power is severely compromised.
And this reliance is what makes positioning, navigation, and timing, or PNT, the critical infrastructure battleground. The U.S. has GPS, but China has developed its own powerful modern competitor, Beidou.
And the sources indicate Beidou is rapidly overtaking GPS.
That's the key concern, yes. Beidou's third generation hit full operational capacity in 2020. It has 49 operational satellites. The problem is GPS is aging. It just hasn't received the sustained investment to keep pace.
So Beidou is just newer and better funded.
It's newer, it benefits from continuous state funding, and it has a much larger infrastructure, nearly double the number of satellites as GPS, plus more ground stations. All that redundancy translates directly to greater availability and higher accuracy, especially in Asia.
And that must have direct implications for military capabilities.
Oh, absolutely. It significantly enhances the PLA's ability to conduct precision strikes anywhere in the world. With reliable global coverage, it improves the coordination and accuracy of long-range missile systems.
And Beidou has a capability that GPS doesn't, right? The short messaging service.
It does, and this is a major operational advantage. That service allows military operators to give real-time updates and commands to uncrewed systems, including missiles, enhancing their command and control globally, and it's independent of standard communication channels.
Which is absolutely foundational to modern military operations.
Totally. So, given this deep dependency the U.S. has, it's no surprise that China has invested heavily in counterspace capabilities.
Weapons designed specifically to deny, degrade, or destroy U.S. satellites.
Right. China explicitly views space as a warfighting domain. And for 2 decades, they've been systematically building a range of tools to achieve space superiority.
What are the kinetic capabilities we need to worry about most?
The kinetic weapons are things like ground-based and space-based anti-satellite weapons, or ASATs. These are basically missiles you launch from the ground to physically destroy a satellite in orbit.
And we've seen them test these.
We have, and those tests generate massive amounts of dangerous space debris in the process.
What about the non-kinetic threat?
That's often a more subtle, harder to attribute threat. Things like radio frequency jamming, which blinds or deafens a satellite by overwhelming its signals, or directed energy systems like lasers that can temporarily or permanently blind satellite sensors.
And many older U.S. satellites are vulnerable.
They are. A lot of these high-value systems were deployed back when space was seen as a benign environment. They just don't have many defensive capabilities.
Now, in recent years, the U.S. has tried to build resilience through proliferated constellations. Starlink is the obvious example. Does that change the calculation?
It changed the calculus significantly. These constellations, with hundreds or thousands of small satellites in low Earth orbit, offer resilience through redundancy. If you lose one, the network just degrades gracefully instead of failing catastrophically.
So it makes a denial campaign much harder to pull off.
Immensely harder. Get this. There's a compelling calculation in the sources. If China dedicated its entire ASAT capability to destroying Starlink, even if they could get 10 successful intercepts a day,
10 a day.
Even then, it would still take them almost 2 full years to destroy just that one constellation. And that's not even counting the massive debris field it would create, which would threaten everyone's satellites.
So complete denial is difficult and time-consuming, but what remains vulnerable to a quick, decisive strike?
The primary vulnerability is still those exquisite satellites, the large, bus-sized, billion-dollar military and intelligence systems in higher orbits. China has mature kinetic capabilities in LEO that put those assets at grave risk.
And commercial PNT alternatives still lag behind GPS.
They do. So the U.S. urgently needs a truly GPS-independent PNT architecture to ensure continuity of operations.
Another area where U.S. leadership is eroding is remote sensing collecting imagery from orbit.
That leadership is slipping very quickly. A 2024 ranking of commercial remote sensing systems found that Chinese firms led in 5 of 11 critical areas. The U.S. led in just 4.
And in some areas, the U.S. doesn't even rank.
Right. The U.S. doesn't even make the top 3 for C-band synthetic aperture radar, which is a vital all-weather day or night capability.
And this isn't just a theoretical problem. This erosion of leadership has direct, dangerous, real-world security implications that are already playing out.
The examples are stark. Take Changwang Satellite Technology, a major Chinese firm. They were sanctioned for providing satellite imagery to the Wagner Group.
Supporting Russia's invasion of Ukraine.
Exactly. And even more recently, the U.S. State Department indicated that the same company supplied imagery to Houthi rebels, who were using it to coordinate targeting runs on U.S. warships in the Red Sea.
So this is no longer hypothetical. It's state-directed commercial entities using dual-use technology to directly support adversaries.
Which demonstrates the profound link between commercial space and national security. It's a whole new ballgame.
This brings us directly to how both nations are leveraging the commercial sector, which is maybe the biggest difference between this second space race and the original one.
It is, and the foundational shift here is really in the philosophy. Private spaceflight versus government bureaucracy.
The sources say private companies embrace a model of learning from failure.
Which is the polar opposite of the no-failure mindset you see in conventional cost-plus government projects. That no-failure environment leads to soaring costs and glacial development speeds.
Because accountability is so high.
Right. But private entrepreneurs, they treat failure as a lesson you need to learn to get faster. Elon Musk's early explosive failures with reusable rockets were the perfect demonstration of this. He accepted that short-term cost for the long-term breakthrough.
A breakthrough that's now driving the entire industry.
Including in China, absolutely.
So this commercial competition is now focused intensely on reusable launch vehicles, or RLRs. SpaceX is the undisputed leader there.
And reusability is the economic key. If you can reuse the first stage booster, which can be up to 70% of the rocket's cost, you fundamentally change the economics of getting to space. It drives down costs and speeds up launch frequency.
And China is attempting to catch up very, very quickly.
They're moving with incredible urgency, leveraging their massive state-led industrial policy. You have multiple Chinese commercial firms like Landspace and iSpace advancing RLR development, and analysts predict they could reach competitive parity with SpaceX by 2030.
Let's look at one of their specific programs, Landspace. They successfully launched the ZQ-3 rocket.
Right, the ZQ-3. And notably, it's primarily made of stainless steel, which mirrors the material choice of Starship. It's designed to compete for the contracts to build out China's own massive internet satellite networks.
But the launch wasn't a complete success.
Not entirely. The second stage reached orbit, but the attempt to recover the crucial first stage booster was unsuccessful. So it shows they're in that difficult testing phase, gaining experience, but still lagging in operational reusability.
And even China's state-owned enterprises are adapting their designs based on U.S. private sector success. The Long March 9, their super heavy lift vehicle.
The evolution of the Long March 9 is fascinating. It initially looked like a traditional Saturn V-type rocket, but the designs have changed multiple times to be more and more Starship-like.
With plans for a fully reusable version.
A fully reusable two-stage version is planned for the 2040s. It shows they recognize where the industry is heading, and they're pivoting state resources to follow that model.
That acceleration and launch capacity is critical because it feeds directly into the LEO mega-constellations race.
Right. And this isn't just about satellites. It's a high-stakes competition to secure finite orbital slots and spectrum rights through the International Telecommunications Union, the ITU.
The U.S. currently leads in satellites deployed, right? Mostly due to Starlink.
The U.S. has a significant lead, yes. In 2024, it was something like 2,272 U.S. satellites versus about 270 for China. But that gap is closing because of China's massive state-coordinated approach.
They're building two major constellations, Guoang and Qianfan.
That's right. Guoang is the first, aiming for a huge 13,000 satellites, mostly for domestic and military use. And Qianfan, the second, plans for 15,000 satellites. And that one is focused on providing foreign telecom service to global markets.
So together, that's over 28,000 satellites. Why is securing those orbital slots through the ITU so urgent?
It's a literal first-come, first-served land rush in space. The ITU is the UN agency that manages all this. To reserve a slot, you file a plan, then you have to actually deploy satellites within a certain time frame to show you're using it.
And China is aggressively filing these claims.
Exactly. They know that once a slot and a frequency are legally reserved, your competitors often have to find less efficient or more challenging alternatives. It's about locking up the best real estate.
Beyond just the sheer number of satellites, China is also showing leadership in next-generation satellite tech.
They are pushing the envelope. Changguang Satellite Technology, the same company we mentioned earlier, announced its Jilin-1 constellation achieved a record-setting 100 gigabit per second laser transmission to a mobile ground station.
100 gigabits per second. That is an astonishing data rate. How does laser communication change the game?
It's a massive leap forward. That's roughly equivalent to transmitting the entire contents of a Blu-ray disc in about half a second.
Wow.
Laser comms offer two huge advantages: extremely high data rates and much greater security than radio signals because the beam is so narrow and hard to intercept. And doing it to a mobile ground station shows clear defense implications for linking to forces anywhere.
And then there's the advance in direct-to-device connectivity. China completed the first 5G satellite-to-smartphone video call.
This is a subtle but really critical technical advantage. What makes it stand out is that they used standard 5G protocols.
Unlike US and UK competitors.
Right. Competitors like the Starlink T-Mobile partnership often rely on custom proprietary technology. By using standard 5G protocols, China Telecom can effectively make their satellites an orbiting extension of existing cell networks. You can use a standard phone with no special hardware.
Which gives them a huge market advantage for quickly expanding service.
A massive advantage, especially in regions like Southeast Asia and across their Belt and Road Initiative.
So this intense technological and economic competition, it inevitably leads to a battle over governance, how space should be run.
And this governance battle is arguably the most profound long-term risk. The competition isn't really about technology at the end of the day. It's about fundamentally different models of global control.
The sources call it astropolitical bifurcation.
A great term for it. You have the U.S. pushing for an open, rules-based multilateral model focused on transparency and public-private partnerships. And then you have China advancing a sovereign-centric, state-controlled, opaque model.
This split plays out most dramatically in the global commons contradiction, which is fascinating. It involved a complete reversal of policy from both countries.
It did. The 1967 Outer Space Treaty established the original foundation, universal access, and no nation can claim sovereignty over a celestial body.
For decades, the U.S. supported that idea.
Generally, yes. But in 2020, under the Trump administration, the U.S. explicitly rejected the phrase global commons for outer space.
Why reject that specific phrasing?
It was necessary to support domestic U.S. laws, specifically the Space Act of 2015. That act says private American companies can have property rights over resources they extract in space, like lunar ice or asteroid metals.
So the U.S. position became, space can't be owned, but the stuff in it can be.
You got it. And this rejection created this huge political opening internationally, which China immediately seized.
Even though they'd historically avoided the term global commons themselves.
Right, because they preferred state-centric control. But now they embrace the language. They position themselves as the champions of universal access in space as a shared resource. They used it to paint the U.S. as the self-interested nation trying to privatize the frontier for corporate gain.
And this political positioning sets the stage for the rival governance frameworks aimed at the moon. On one side, you have the U.S.-led Artemis Accords.
The Artemis Accords are a set of voluntary bilateral agreements now signed by over 50 nations. They're rooted in the Outer Space Treaty, but they provide a modern operational framework. They promote transparency, data sharing, and crucially, the right to utilize space resources.
And China's alternative is the International Lunar Research Station, or ILRS.
Yes, led by China and Russia. It's framed as this inclusive multilateral alternative designed to attract partners who might feel excluded by U.S.-led frameworks. They aim for an operational base on the moon's south pole by 2035. They have about 17 countries so far, but their goal is 50.
And attracting that broad coalition is a powerful move. It lets them build international support for their own preferred rules.
It's an attempt to create a competing legal majority. China's goal is to establish precedents on resource use and sovereignty that favor their state-centric, opaque model. If enough countries join the ILRS, you risk having two competing legal regimes in space.
which would vastly complicate everything.
Yeah.
Safety, commerce, coordination.
Everything. And this rivalry extends down to the mundane but foundational level of technical standards, specifically at the ITU, which we mentioned earlier.
Right, the UN Agency for Telecommunications.
China is actively trying to shape global communications architecture there through a strategy analysts call inundation and obstruction.
What does that look like in practice at a UN agency?
It means you overwhelm the deliberation groups with massive volumes of technical proposals. Then, the sources report, Chinese delegations are instructed to block consensus until Chinese-led standards are adopted.
It's part of their China Standards 2035 plan.
It is, and if their technical specifications become the international norm, foreign competitors are forced to redesign their products to be compatible. It's a way to gain immense leverage over the entire digital space domain.
This political friction must create some serious tensions for international cooperation. The European Space Agency seems to be trying to walk a very careful line.
A very difficult line. ESA still maintains joint science missions with China, like the Einstein probe. Their policy seems to be cooperate on pure science where you can, but maintain independence on strategic policy.
But that neutrality is proving incredibly difficult to maintain.
It is. ESA had firm plans for European astronauts to visit the Chinese Tiangong space station. Those plans were suspended due to a lack of budgetary and political approvals.
And we're seeing direct action from some allies.
We are. Sweden, for example, canceled contracts for a Chinese ground station on its territory over explicit concerns the data could be used for military intelligence. It highlights the difficult reality. Dual-use technology forces political decisions, whether you want them or not.
We have covered a vast and intricate terrain today, from lunar resource claims all the way to 5G communication protocols. Let's synthesize the key battlegrounds we've explored in this deep dive.
Okay, so first we saw the immediate urgency of the lunar race. You have Artemis facing these immense architectural hurdles with Starship's refueling, while China is pushing aggressively toward 2030 with its ILRS.
Then we explored the alarming technological parity in these dual-use systems. China's Beidou is rapidly overtaking GTS, and its counterspace capabilities are a direct threat to legacy U.S. assets.
Right. We detailed the rapid, state-backed acceleration of China's commercial launch sector, which is closing the gap on reusability, and the huge stakes in the LEO mega-constellation race for securing those finite orbital positions in spectrum rights.
And finally, we analyzed that fundamental ideological split over space governance, highlighted by the U.S. rejecting the global commons rhetoric and China strategically adopting it to push its own state-centric norms.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? Well, the contest is ultimately about protecting critical infrastructure. As we detailed, most Americans depend on space far more than they even realize. This is about maintaining resilience and really safeguarding who sets the precedence for humanity's expansion into the cosmos.
The consensus among policy analysts and our sources seems to stress the need for urgent action. This means more investment in things like PNT redundancy, regulatory reform to harness private sector innovation.
And strengthening international partnerships like the Artemis Accords to ensure U.S. primacy in defining the future. The message is pretty simple. If the U.S. stalls, China is prepared to fill that void with its opaque state-directed model.
So to tie this all together, let's step back and consider the historical context here in the U.S.
It's a great point. Throughout American history, foundational, often military-led initiatives have laid the groundwork for massive civil and commercial expansion.
You mean like Lewis and Clark? That was a military expedition, fundamentally.
Exactly. It was for geographic discovery, sure, but it blazed a strategic trail for westward expansion and commerce. Or think of Eisenhower championing the interstate highway system. It served national defense, but it revolutionized commerce.
Even the internet and GPS started as military projects.
They did. So given the current high-stakes competition in this ultimate high-ground cislunar space, the question we have to leave you with is this. What crucial piece of foundational military-accelerated infrastructure must be established now?
Today, in cislunar space, is it a permanent, resilient navigational network, a common communication standard, something else entirely?
The precedents we establish in the coming years will determine whether space becomes a closed, territorial domain defined by competing states or a vast, accessible new market for humanity.
That's a powerful thought on the future of the new frontier. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll see you next time.